Why do so many people shit all over harm reduction? And why do so many people shit? Because as you're explaining this to me, and I understand it, and Bill W. in the AA program, I'm a really fortunate cat that was able to walk into some church basements and really hang in there and learn how to be happy from people who had that roadmap. So
Yeah.
I'm eternally grateful to those people. And like you, when someone would come in and they were new to the program, and the trying part and the journey, which really is the destination when you're an alcoholic. And one time I did ask, hey, at what point do we graduate? And they're like, yeah, you're not doing that, dude.
Yeah,
but
we don't.
but it was, yeah, I know. I'm like, have I arrived yet? They're like, oh, you need to read chapter 2. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, so we never arrive. No, you never arrive. You're always working on this. But it was the start of that journey. And you saw so many people come into those rooms, and to admit to a group of people who also were in pain and suffering, some had answers, some didn't, that you were an alcoholic, you were in trouble, and you needed their help. There was something so fucking courageous about that. And every time I saw a new person come in and put their hand up and say, I need your help, and it makes me emotional right now talking about it. It did something to me. It was this idea that we're all flawed. We all need help, and we get that help if we're alive. We don't get it if we're dead.
100%.
And this is the harm reduction thing that means so much to me, which is why I wondered why you're going to have to pardon my language. I know you're a better person than me at your tender age, but why fucking morons and politicians and people who don't give a shit about that very important part, which is dead people can't get better. I wonder what their problem is, or if it's just ignorance. Like, is it the idea that they don't understand the statistics? Is it the idea that they don't want to look at it, or that they're just perfectly happy continuing to judge people who are suffering and in pain, who have been to the bottom of barrels they can't imagine? Like, what is it? And why does harm reduction and safe supply get turned into a political problem, not a problem where everybody gets on the same team and says, hey, dead people can't get better, dude?
Yeah, I mean, it's the $1 million question in my life. I mean, you explain it to people, and people. I think they get the concept of it, but they don't care for it. And then they keep telling people it's like go to treatment to get off drugs, and then it's a chronic relapsing condition. So what happens after they go use drugs again, and the toxic drug supply is there? They ambush them and kill them. That doesn't work either. And so you really have to be mindful of that. I don't know. I mean, it's for a guy that survived through all of it. When I hear that kind of rhetoric and language, it's very hurtful. Obviously, because it's
You're
done
way
so.
fucking nicer about it than I am. I'll tell you that.
Nice.
You're really nice to people about it. Like, you're like, oh, this is a real shame, Pierre Polyev. Even this guy here, alcohol is drugs. I'm going to put this up. Oh no, that was your Porter flight. I want to get to that later.
Yeah.
There's another gentleman. I can't remember his name. Oh, here we go. This is the alcohol one. Isn't it interesting? Most of the people complain about people who use drugs or drug users themselves and consume these so-called drug dens. They're called pubs, by the way, and even outside where the public can see them getting intoxicated. You speak up against harm reduction. The same people that are here slamming beers, which is a drug. Alcohol might be one of the worst drugs because it's super socially acceptable and you can advertise for it. And it's a carcinogen, it's a known carcinogen. It's one of the worst things you could do for your body, your mind. There is no nutritional benefit to it at all. And you're getting in shit from those guys for promoting what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, you know what? This is the thing is that I actually had this conversation today with somebody where I explained it. It's like I don't have a personal beef with anybody, but if you are thinking that you're going to attack harm reduction and safer supply, and mislead or use a language that shouldn't be used, it's very stigmatizing and dehumanizing, then I'm going to respond to that because it's not personal, but it's against the person, but it is personal to me that this is very hurtful language and it's not helpful, it's uninspiring, and I feel the need that hey, if you're going to do that out as well. And the thing is too is that I just I found it very interesting that a lot of people in our society use drugs, except some drugs are socially acceptable, celebrated. And you know what? Alcohol, like I said, has caused a tremendous amount of it caused a tremendous amount of damage in my life. Domestic violence, sexual abuse. Look at the Stanley Cup riots. That was alcohol. You go to a sporting events, fights after bars, people getting stabbed, people doing things out, driving cars drunk. I mean, all these, there's a lot of chaos that comes with that. But yet, for some reason, this is not going to be talked about. And we're going to talk about safer supply. So I feel the need to balance the scales a little bit, and to showcase that and to say, hey, listen, like, it is interesting that we point fingers at other people who use drugs while we use drugs ourselves.
It's a little hypocritical.
Just a little,
bit,
right?
Just a
like, come on.
smidge.
Like,
no, dude. It's crazy. Like every single thing that Pierre Poilievre does, he's got a drink in his hand. I mean, he walked out of that Diagolon trailer a couple of weeks ago. He looked pretty smoked. And I'm not going to take his inventory. I'm not here to do that. But, the Christmas videos where he's pouring a few ounces of rum into a drink and making some kind of rum shandy.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah. It's like everything he does.
Wasn't that like a 15-minute,
yeah,
recipe?
it was a 15-minute. And it was fucking ridiculous. It was like milk, Kahlua, and rum. And I'm like, dude, I can do that in 5 minutes. I just choose not
What's taking you so long?
You got too many ingredients in there. Just drink the rye. What are you doing?
I'm drinking it right out of the bottle. Never mind putting it in the blender.
Oh, dude. But that's the thing. Like, it's so much more socially acceptable. And I work with guys that have an issue with alcohol. And we go back to this idea that people that are addicts, people who are alcoholics, don't have tools or skills because they grew up in trauma and they ran away from that accountability like I did, probably like you did, where you're like, you know what, part of it is I'm going to show everybody, I'm going to go the other way, or I don't want to have to deal with those things, or the trauma of dealing with why my parents didn't love me, or my dad hit me, or what, all of the things that come around in your head that you just have never squared, right? And so we all run away from it. That's exactly what alcohol does too. That is the purpose of alcohol. That is the purpose of drugs. That is the purpose of substances. It's to numb that feeling. It's the emotional aspect that everybody's attached to. The physical stuff we all hate. Yeah. And therein is the shame. The shame that so many of us struggle with. And if you ask me today, Guy, and I'd love your opinion, is that when I see people like that dumping on people like you and others who are doing a different kind of drug, right? Who are literally addicted to shame, hiding from shame. I think, my God, do you not understand there's a human being behind that addiction?
Yeah, 100%. And I've said this many times before, is that we're not shaming just people for using their drugs. We're shaming people for the reason why they're using drugs, which is usually a lot of people to cope with the unbearable impacts of trauma, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, and all that. So we're actually now shaming them for what happened to them, which is, to me, it's so sad, man. It's like, listen, political votes off the lives of people struggling, to me, is real sad, because, and then, just these simple slogans like, we're going to bring your loved ones home drug free. Listen, that's easy to say. And the challenge is that's not going to happen. And also too, if you were to cancel harm reduction services such as safer supply or supervised consumption sites, well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. You're going to have an increase in overdose deaths. You're going to have an increase in public consumption. And sadly, you're going to have an increase of people using alone and not reaching out for help and support when they need it. And that's where the connection is with harm reduction, is that it's such a vital connection piece. And you know what? Like, there's a lot of times we don't talk about social isolation and what people are struggling with. I'll tell you something. That is,
dude, it's the biggest. Yeah, me too.
It is the biggest thing. Never mind everything else that we do. Social isolation is crippling people in our society. And if we don't connect people to communities and support and be there and help people move forward, I'm going to tell you, people are going to fall back into what's familiar, because even during social isolation and being in a community such as the downtown East Side, and I felt this sense of loneliness, at least I felt connected to a community of loneliness.
It kept you there, right? Kept you in the game.
It kept me going, man. There was like a smidgen of what are the possibilities of hope? I just need a little bit of hope today. And it gave me just enough, just enough to open my eyes and just to get through the day.
The isolation piece, every single alcoholic, every drug addict, every person that's got trauma lives with this crippling shame, right? Where, you get criticized by anybody because you live with shame, and your fight or flight it's at 12 out of 10 all the time, right? Unless you're using, and that's the only way that you come down. It could be a couple of drinks, it could be whatever, it could be some coke, it could be some heroin, whatever your DOC is. But to do that alone, right? And then to be forced to be alone by the public narrative that's being framed by people like Pierre Poilievre or anybody who has a better answer than you after doing it for 30 years, where he said he's going to end and defund safer drug supply. This is Pierre Poilievre the other day. This is just a couple days ago. He's vowing to defund safe supply drug policies, put money into treatment. And what he's doing is telling people, we don't really care about the root cause of what your issue is. We just don't want to see you on our streets because we want to be able to walk in and out of buildings without looking at you. We don't want you sullying up our street corners and back alleys. We don't want you doing drugs where we don't want to see you doing drugs. And to your point, you're shaming their shame on top of telling them that they don't want you in society, to a person who already instinctively knows that and has been told that by his family, been told that by his or her teachers, been told that by people. And then you start hearing that messaging. It's triple baked, dude. The idea that you are worthless it becomes not just your reality, it is cemented for some people. And it drives me crazy because the statistics, right? You've seen the statistics. And I'd love to know some of the statistics from the Vancouver pilot project, because it has not just saved lives. It has been remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, it's done well for so many people, and that's the importance of these safer supply programs, is that it stabilized a lot of people's lives where they just removed them from the toxic drug supply. And for some people as well, is that it's limited their contact with the drug supply, which is really important as well. And like I said, we don't have anybody dying from safe supply. We have people dying from fentanyl. And so for me, I'm just kind of like, well, I mean, what would you rather have? I mean, if you ask any parent, obviously you don't want your kids to use drugs. Of course, that's the first and foremost one, or to go to recovery and change their lives. But you've gone so many times that people aren't going back right away. What's your options? And for me, I'd always take the option is that, well, I'd rather have, my child have access to safer supply than the toxic drug supply. And I've asked many family members have said to me, Guy, I wish my son or my daughter had access to that program instead of the market, because they're gone. And so that's the real heartbreaking thing. And I mean, I hear heartbreaking, people reach out all the time. I even have people reach out from the US because they don't have Medicaid there. And I help people. I just, my thing with Human Connection is just to know what services are available globally. So if somebody does reach out, I just had a guy reach out from Philadelphia, and I just was like, oh, I just happen to know a guy in Philadelphia. And anyway, they reached out to me on X and said, hey, I got on Medicaid, that place that you sent me to help me, and I'm on methadone and I haven't used the drugs for 2 weeks and I feel good. And I was like, man, that's great, man. I mean, I don't care what people's pathway is, but for me, I just don't want people to die. And I'm very passionate about it. I'm very outspoken about it. And I'll continue to be that way. I mean, listen, I've always said this, like, hey, I'm not supposed, I'm borrowed time anyway. I'm not supposed to be here, and I'm here. And so I'm going to ask the questions that need to be asked, because I have an understanding of what it's going to take for us to move forward in our society. And that's really a full continuum of care, of harm reduction, and of recovery services. And something you said earlier too about AA, I used to say this about AA. I was like, can you guys get any damn good coffee in here? Why is the coffee so shitty in AA?
Sucks.
It's
always a day old donuts too. It's like, and when it was my turn to do coffee and donuts, I'm like, I'll get the fresh ones. I'll get the fresh Tims. I'll get the big thing. I don't want you to make it in that church cauldron. Please stop with the sugar cubes. Like, the snacks could be better. The snacks and the coffee could be a little bit better. But I'll tell you something. I found my smile in those rooms, and I lost it.
Yeah.
I
Connection. That's the
found
biggest thing.
community,
It's
meetings after the meetings, coffee. Someone would say, "Hey, you're a really good guy, Dean."
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a second. To your point, where isolation crushes you. There was a day before I went in. It was right just when I got into AA, and I was like, I felt like the biggest loser in the world, just a piece of trash. You said piece of garbage. I'm like, yeah, I totally get the trashy feeling. I mean, I'm worthless. No one wants to see me. I'm afraid to show my face. As a matter of fact, I don't want to go anywhere. So I was like hibernating 7 years ago for months. I'd just be in the backyard in the cabana by the pool going, no one wants to see me. I'm a mess. I can't do anything. I'm useless. I guess I am everything everybody said I was, including my dad when I was a kid. Like, you know what I mean? Like it just kind of came home. And my girlfriend at the time, she's like, "Hey, can you walk to Shoppers Drug Mart?" And when you're that fucked up, and someone's like, "Hey, can you go do something?" You get the flop sweats. You're like, "Oh, I gotta go out in public." I'm sure you can identify with this, right?
Oh God. I used to just, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even, I remember having an income tax check in New West and I'm in the downtown east side and I was like, oh, I gotta take the SkyTrain there. Can't you guys can't you guys send a pigeon to just deliver it or something? Like I can't go out in public. Like,
everything seems so serious when you're fucked that messed up. Like you can't stomach any criticism. You don't want to, like, you just don't want anything bad to happen because you're on a ledge, right?
Yeah, I didn't want anybody to see me, man. Like I was just trying to just like, please, like I'm not doing well here, right? And that's the shame that we talk about, and that's why it's, you up at those harm reduction facilities. I tell you, the reason why I showed up is because they cared. And I always described it as this: when I walked into remember the theme song from Cheers?
Mm-hmm.
That was my theme song when I walked in.
Everybody knows your name.
Yeah, I was like, Norm.
Guy.
Good evening, everybody. I'm just gonna shoot some heroin and cocaine tonight.
I'll be over in the corner if anybody wants to have a snappy conversation. I should be super high in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, and I tell you, and that's where I always called those people paid friends. They were they cared. That nurse that brought me back to life, I didn't say our big full circle moment was when we were colleagues together at the same facility, helping the same people as me when I once struggled together. And
did she know it was you?
Oh yeah. She actually, when she found out, she saw my name on the list. But what was funny is when we were sitting at a round table discussion and I saw her, I was like, and she started talking. I just interrupted her and I was like, "Oh my God, you saved my life." And she just started to break down and cry. And I was like, "Oh my God, thank you." And oh man, the whole staff started crying. I mean, it was a very,
dude, I'm fucking crying right now.
Yeah. She said, she said, I just said, "Oh my God, man, you saved my life. Not only that, you helped me get into recovery, and look at it." And she goes, "Look at you now." And when she actually talked to me about that moment, she said, "We didn't think you were coming back." And I actually thought, when I look at your life today of what you do, is that you could have also been known as the first person to ever die at Insight. And I was just like, no way. And she just said, "Guy, it's just like, wow." And I mean, she's just, I love her. I mean, my kids wouldn't be alive. Everything I have in my recovery life wouldn't exist if harm reduction didn't exist. And everything I've learned through the process of recovery and people who are in recovery that have recovered as well have just, been amazing. And that's the gratitude that you have to pay things forward. And like I said, it's like, when I share my whole story with students and galas and conferences, globally, I share it in the hopes that people don't ever walk down the painful road that I did. But if you do, I want you to know that it's okay as well. There is people that care about you and love you and want to support you. And sometimes I often say is that sometimes we just haven't found our right pathway yet, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to find it.